All right, welcome back everyone. This is the video for the late Middle Ages, so we're going to jump right into it. So the first thing, look at the map to the right. It's showing you the area that this is taking place. You have the Crazy Duck right there in the middle and the Nike tennis shoe. So we have the Mediterranean Sea, or Crazy Duck, and the Nike tennis shoe, the Black Sea above. And you can see the location of Constantinople right at the heel of the Nike tennis shoe. So the Crusaders are coming from Western Europe, for example, England, France, etc. And they're fighting in what's called the Holy Land, which is in the Middle East. So if you look to the far right, you see the Crusader states highlighted in the pink. So the Crusades are an attempt to reclaim the Holy Land, which is Jerusalem, from the Muslims, and the Ottoman Turks conquered the Byzantine Empire. So next we need to understand the key events of the Crusades. So first we have Pope Urban's speech. Pope Urban is the Pope, obviously, but he's the leader of the Roman Catholic Church in the West. So Pope Urban gives a speech stating that it was God's will to reclaim Jerusalem from the Muslims. And the key here is he promises that everyone who goes and fights will be forgiven of all their sins. So that was a big thing. A lot of people, agreed to go fight because they figured anything they had done bad previously it'd be forgiven and they'd get into heaven. Then we have the capture of Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is this holy city. Again, it has ties to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. All three of these monotheistic religions find Jerusalem very important. So Jerusalem's eventually captured. However, there are a total of 13 crusades going back and forth between Christians and Muslims. So again, the Muslims captured Jerusalem, then the Christians, and so forth. So just a moment ago, I showed you a map, and I told you in pink to the right or to the east of the map, there is what's called Crusader states. So there are 4 Christian realms created in the Middle East, which is Muslim territory, during the Crusades that served as headquarters for the Christian Crusaders. Because remember, they're traveling a very long way to go fight. Next, we have the loss of Jerusalem to Saladin. Now, Saladin is kind of the European version of the Muslim leader's real name, which is Salah ad-Din. So Saladin is a Muslim leader who captured Jerusalem during the Third Crusade, and he kept Jerusalem open to pilgrims. So when the Christians were capturing Jerusalem, they shut it down. So if you were not a Christian, you couldn't come in. But Saladin basically said, if we lock the city down, it's just going to lead to more war. So he was hoping by allowing pilgrims to enter the city, it would make things better, less violence, etc. So, and last on this slide, we have the sack of Constantinople by Western Crusaders. So a lot of people really don't understand what this is all about. What it is, it's a betrayal. So Venice is a power for trading, an economic power during the Middle Ages. And they paid Crusaders to wipe out Constantinople, to remove them as competitors. So it's Christians attacking another Christian, area or nation because of money. So next we have the key effects of the Crusades. So because of the Crusades, what happened? So first, it strengthened the monarchs, the kings and queens, who gained control of taxation during the Crusades. So they were able to tax people, which made the kings and queens or the monarchs rich. Because they controlled the money, they're actually able to pay the troops, pay for supplies, etc. It makes them a little bit more powerful than the Pope, which previously the Pope is the main person who's in charge. Now, because of this, it causes disillusionment with popes and nobles who launched crusades against fellow Christians. So the people who are losing power because of some monarchs, they're mad and they want to get revenge, they want to get their power back. Unfortunately, in the world, power is so important to many people. Next, trade is stimulated throughout the Mediterranean area to the Middle East. Now, this is kind of a good thing. So people coming from Europe are experiencing new products, whether it's fruits like oranges, which they had never seen before, because in Europe, the diet's very bland. So all of a sudden they come to the Middle East and there's all these exotic fruits and they're like, wow, this is amazing. And they want to be able to have those back home when they return from the wars. So this opens up trade routes. Now back to the negative side, it leaves a legacy of bitterness between the Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Each of them individually wants to control Jerusalem because it's very important for their aspect on religion. But what happens is none of them are willing to share it, so they're constantly fighting. Now today, even today in Jerusalem, the city is divided into quarters. There's the Jewish quarter, the Christian quarter, the Muslim quarter, but there's also another quarter for Armenians. And finally, if you remember, the Byzantine Empire was essentially the Roman Empire in the East after the Western Roman Empire falls. But the Byzantine Empire becomes weakened, particularly because of the attacks on Constantinople by other Christians, again being paid by the Venetians. So again, it really weakens the Byzantine Empire and leads to them being conquered by the Ottoman Turks. And as I just pointed out, we have the city of Constantinople. They fell to the Ottoman Turks in 1453, which ended the Byzantine Empire. And Constantinople becomes the capital of the Ottoman Empire. So that's something you'll learn about in world history too. So looking at the picture at the bottom, that's an artistic rendition of the walls of Constantinople falling. They were giant cannons. We talked about this earlier, but at the top, that's a real picture showing what they look like today. And this map is showing the location, reinforcing once again, Constantinople's a crossroads of trade at the heel of the Black Sea. Next up, we have the Black Death. So in the 14th century, the Black Death or bubonic plague decimated the population of much of Asia. Then it spread to Europe by fleas using rats as transportation. So for example, products being traded from Asia to Europe, the rats would stow away because there's food on the ships, and then they would get off at those ports and spread the fleas. Now, back in that time period, rats would have been much more common to people in their homes, and the fleas are jumping off and biting people. Anybody that's had a dog has known there's times when the fleas can get pretty bad. But people really didn't comprehend that's how it was spreading. So what are the effects? What happens? There's a decline in population, obviously, and scarcity of labor. As people are dying, there's no one to work. So attempts by lords to restrict wage increases and land acquisition. So the lords, they need these people to work, but they're also making it more difficult. There's large-scale peasant revolts. So peasants are fighting back. They're like tired of everything. Then there's massacres of the Jewish population. So Jews are blamed for the Black Death, and many of you have probably heard of throughout history Jews get picked on for various reasons, and this is one of the ones that's kind of weird. Jewish people, because of their faith, they believe in taking more baths, more frequently than what people during the Middle Ages normally did. So people blamed their cleanliness on the spread of the Black Death, which, to be honest, it's the opposite. Not taking baths would have, been more of a health issue. And then last, there's the disruption of trade. So because people are afraid of catching the bubonic plague, they don't want to go and make contact with other people because they think that it's spread through the air. The picture to the top right is a plague doctor during the Middle Ages, and I'm going to show you an Assassin's Creed clip here in a second depicting that. So the beak, what they would do is stuff flowers and herbs that smelled good because, again, unfortunately, the Middle Ages probably wasn't the best smelling time period as it was, but then you have dead bodies everywhere. Think about that. 1/3 of all the population is dying because of the plague. So dead bodies are everywhere. So they would stuff these herbs and other flowers into the beak so that it would smell better. And they also felt like it would filter out the bad air, so to speak. But again, remember, it's not spreading by the air, it's spreading by fleas biting people.
There we are. Now get out of here.
Grazie. This way. Quite a night.
Indeed. Only wish they were all as much fun.
And then I'd like to share this with you. I thought you'd find this interesting. So what you're looking at is a clip from Microsoft Flight Simulator, and the island that I'm zooming in on is called Poveglia. It's considered, if you believe in this sort of thing, it's considered to be one of the most haunted places in the world. So what you're looking at is this island was where they would send people who had the symptoms of the Black Death during the Middle Ages, and they would just leave them there to die. So if you see, there's 3 parts of the island. That little roundish part, octagon, that was added later. That was built during World War I and World War II. The main part of the island has buildings. That is an insane asylum that was added much later, not during the Middle Ages, obviously. But this back part of the island, that's where they would dig plague pits and bury the dead. So there are videos online that you can go check out where they're digging into the soil, and it's a lot of human bone in there. So this is a very scary place in terms of you get creeped out pretty easy. All right, and finally, education during the Middle Ages. So we talked about earlier, in Rome, people with money were educated, but in the Middle Ages, that wasn't necessarily the case. Mostly it was only the church workers, or what's called the clergy. They were the only ones to receive education during the Middle Ages. The masses were uneducated, and they were more concerned about their feudal obligations, meaning what did they have to do to receive protection from the lords. Again, church scholars. This is the group of people who are educated. They were among the few who could read and write. They worked in monasteries. Going to show you a clip again back to Assassin's Creed Valhalla, showing you what a monastery in the Middle Ages would have looked like. What was their job? They mainly translated Greek and Arabic works into Latin. So again, we have all of these works, books, stories that get translated from Greek into Arabic, and now they're being translated back into Latin. So they made new knowledge in philosophy, medicine, and science available in Europe, and they laid the foundation for the rise of universities in Europe in the 13th century. So the crazy thing is, these monasteries are basically church-based, and as you'll see in the video clip coming up in a second, and this is where people would have to go if they wanted to be educated. You would have to become a monk. But later on, education becomes more available to other people. So again, this is the clip from Assassin's Creed, and again, during the Middle Ages, monasteries would have all kinds of books, but they would also have gold and other precious gems and jewelry there because they're used for religious purposes. So if you can see in the background, there's several buildings. You can see the Christian crosses on the top of them. Now, earlier, before the late Middle Ages, but in the early Middle Ages, and the Vikings and all would raid these places for the money, you know, for the gold, for the gems and things like that. So that's why it's in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which is, most of you probably understand, that's a Viking game, but this happens in medieval Europe. So again, you can see these are like ruins. All right, so we're gonna wrap this video up. I'll let you watch the end of the clip if you want to. And we have one more unit, which is going to be the Renaissance, which is pretty interesting. So I'll see you then.